What's up, folks? Welcome back to the OTG YouTube channel. Today we are going to talk about a very interesting topic that I actually don't know a ton about on the technical side. So if you've watched our gas mask video already, you're probably used to this spiel, but I'm going to talk about the what, the things I have experience with, some of the pros and cons of different setups, the actual items themselves, but as far as how the radio works, what the capabilities of different ones are, antenna theory and all that kind of stuff, I am very, unga bunga, press button, talk. That's it. So if you have a lot of technical questions, if you want technical training on this stuff, we do offer it through our communications instructor, Lindsay. She has a company, LKD Communications, and it is fantastic. She does wonderful instruction, online courses, in-person courses. She builds TAC servers. She's actually building a TAC course where she will be able to use a dedicated server, hand out the items to the students, and then instruct on how to use it. And like I said, she also offers services on setting those servers up and all that kind of stuff. She's an absolute wizard. I don't really understand what it is she does, which is why we pay her so well. So without further ado, let's talk about the stuff. Y'all know I don't like talking about gear. I think it can often be a waste of time. But comms is one of those things that if you don't have it set up right, there's not really a point in having it. So we're going to try to sort of just talk about the setups and the different equipment. Now right out here in front, we have the Baofeng, the Baofeng, however you pronounce it, the UV5R. It's sort of the base radio. It's like the thing everybody wants to spend 25 bucks on to have. It's really cool for airsoft. Even for like our members club, we suggested guys, if they didn't have anything, hey, just so you can talk to the other dudes at training operations, buy a Baofeng. But it's working off of FRS frequencies, like what you'd have a walkie-talkie from a Walmart, set speaking on. So it's nothing crazy, but it is very programmable and it can do a lot. So there are some legal issues with some of the things you can do with them. So I'm not advising you to do anything illegal with them, but there are some ham radio things, some stuff with the people who regulate this and make laws about using radios. So if you are going to purchase something like that, just be aware of what you're doing. Again, take a freaking course on how it works. And when it comes to the antennas and what they're capable of doing, how far you can push them and all that kind of stuff, a lot of that has to do with your environment. Obviously, this is not a super powerful radio because it's tiny. And unless you have a good antenna, these Nagoya antennas are actually really good. But unless you have a good antenna, it's not going to go super far. And that's where you start getting into things like repeaters and all that other stuff. So all that to say, great starting point, but it's not the kind of thing that I would want to take on a true operation, and it's not the kind of thing that's super secure. So good starting point for 25 bucks. The plugs that go into those, the two plug, I forget what it's called, the Kenwood plug, not super stable, really easy to break, and they're just in general kind of finicky. So getting away from those plugs that just another radio, even if it's similar in capability to the Baofeng, but it doesn't use a Kenwood plug, could be better. So there's things like the Alliance, if I'm saying that right, Alliance, whatever it is, also a Chinese radio, but it's got a little bit better capabilities and it's got different sort of hardware. Does it also use Kenwood plugs? No, so it uses a different plug all of its own, so that's good.
It's the Motorola style.
Yeah, Motorola style plugs. So even amongst Motorola's, there's different plugs, there's different systems, the way everything clips in. Most everything a company makes is going to be proprietary. So part of why people like something like the Baofeng is there's just a shitload of products out there that have Kenwood attachments that are not expensive. You can get almost any of the PTTs, like this Nexus PTT, you can get that with a Kenwood plug for like 50, 60 bucks. On that, something to consider, what you're talking through, like your military style headset or whatever else, if you don't have an amplified, we almost died. If you don't have an amplified PTT, you're being so quiet up until just that one point. If you don't have an amplified PTT, it won't work. And I found that out the hard way by buying some Amazon PTT that once I plugged it into my Peltors, I couldn't get out into the Peltor. So you have to have all these right pieces and parts. If you're using a military style headset, which I would suggest, it has comms housed within it, electronic ear pro and all that, get a amplified PTT. And even if it's going, into a Kenwood plug, into a Baofeng, it's going to work with the military style headset. So we've talked about that. We talked about some of the cheaper other options. Going up a little bit as far as radios go, we'll talk about this one here. And this is the Motorola XTS 5000. This is now available on gray markets or used. I don't know, anywhere from $300 to $600, depending on if you get it programmed or not. If you find someone who does programming services, Motorola is really, really finicky about who gets to program their radios. So if you find someone willing to do it and they don't work at Motorola, they're going to charge a good bit. Like Mitchell was saying off camera there, they all have different ways of plugging in. So if you're, again, this is for novices, and I don't teach this class. I'm just talking about the physical items and some of the things you need to know as a consumer. They're all going to attach different ways. So a Kenwood plug here versus the old style Motorola plugs, the new Motorola's don't use this anymore. So the 5000 plugs look different than the 4500s or the 4000s or the 6000s. So almost every time they make something, you have to buy all new shit to be able to use it. And that's just how they make some of their money. So in that, I run this radio to teach. It's programmed for a lot of different frequencies and capabilities. I'm able to talk with all of our club guys that have certain programs on their radios, and then I'm also able to talk with other students, and there's different capabilities that this radio has. Another thing is obviously battery life, and then just the fact that you can do all sorts of other things without getting into all the stuff about encryption and what's digital and what's analog and all that crap. So I have this radio's hardware set up on this kit, which is what I use a lot when I'm like teaching, traveling and things like that. Like if we're out at the ranch running a live fire CQB course, I'm going to wear this. If we're doing woodland maneuvers with Blake, I'm wearing this, or I'm wearing this. So my teaching radio is going to be able to be put into both of these kits. Now you can see here this big shiny thing on it, and we're going to have B-roll showing this stuff in more detail. All that is a universal adapter for a body-worn antenna. Now the body-worn antenna on one of these kits is from Cattail, and the body-worn antenna on the other kit is from Ohio Risk Management, I think. Are they still around?
I have no idea. I bought my relocation kit from them.
Yeah.
Good quality stuff, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I've had it for 4 or 5 years now. Yeah, everything's custom order. Everything's kind of made to order. So, what a body worn antenna is literally what it sounds like. It plugs in where the antenna would plug in, the manufacturer, little stubby that comes with it, and then it is basically like a snake or a whip. It's a long wire that's housed in a flexible tubing instead of being just a rigid single piece of coil inside a thick plastic. One of the downsides of them is that they can be a little bit more easily damaged. You have to be aware, obviously, with moisture shielding. You don't want to have it in a place where it's going to get cut, snagged, pulled, or hung up on something and pull your body, because you would hate to have to cut or ditch your comms because you got hung up because your body-worn antenna was a snag point. So how you route the antenna is really what I want to talk about on those. It's going to be kind of similar no matter what it is you're doing. And as you can see on the B-roll footage, essentially on this one, it's on a 90-degree relocation on this quick detach. And again, that quick detach is so I can put the radio into both kits without having to change anything over. That 90 degree is actually not really ideal for this chest rig. What that does is it kicks the cord out, and then I have to route it up and around. So it's routed up through the cable management that's present on this, who makes this? Onward Research. This is Mike Jones' company. And this is the Onward Research Recce rig, my favorite word. And basically I'm just routing the antenna up and around my shoulders and then down across the chest. And it's retained pretty well. It's not really going to snag on anything, and I intentionally left it loose so if it did snag on something, it can move free. So this is the lighter weight rig. This is for, for doing movement, and I want to have it scalable with my plate carrier, slick plate carrier, whatever else. Or if we're just doing, like light reconnaissance and things like that, I can just have this by itself with that same radio capability. Now, like I said, if I want to pop that out and I want to place that radio into my Cry AVS, I have the same exact hardware that's able to plug into all of it. Oh yeah, it says the Ohio right there. So I have the same exact hardware, and I'm able to plug the radio in the same way, and I'm able to access the same QD with another 90-degree relocation on a body-worn antenna. Now, on this body-worn antenna, it actually wraps around to the bottom of the plate, and then I also have a Nagoya antenna attached to that. So it's just a relocator on this one. What that allows me to do is move the actual antenna that would be sticking out of the radio all the way around to the back, and then it comes up and over my shoulder. And if I needed to move that whip so it could actually get a little bit more exposure range, whatever you want to call it, I can just pull it out of the shoulder pad and have a buddy tuck it back. Buddy tuck, that's what we call that. So as you can see on both of these kits, it's really just about, can I use the same radio, and can I move it between the kits, and can I get the antenna out of my way? If you have those long whip antennas, right, we've all seen the combat controllers or the JTACs, and everyone's like, oh, it's so cool, they got the whips. Some people call that a shoot me stick, because you can't get behind anything without having a giant bug antenna sticking out from behind the rock or whatever it is. So getting away from having to have a big long antenna sticking out off your person and just taking that antenna and making it wrap around you, you might get more testicular cancer, but at least you didn't get shot, right? You can die slowly later. And honestly, I don't think you really can do a whip style antenna on big, like the Imbiter radios and all that stuff. You're not doing body worn with that anyway, because they're a lot higher frequency, if I'm not mistaken. So let's talk about other types of radio, and let's talk about other types of antenna setups. For law enforcement, and this is my duty gear and this is my issued radio, the only thing on this entire kit that is not my personal property is this radio. And I bought everything else. So, or was given it for testing a long time ago. So what I have here is a Harris P7300. It's a bit older, and it has, again, a proprietary way to attach all of the hardware to it. But what's neat is companies like Comm Gear Supply, which we're actually now partnered with to do communications gear supply, they make a universal adapter, which is super neat. And again, you're watching this up close on B-roll, but the main idea here is that with a universal adapter, I could, in theory, have a bunch of these PTTs with the same tip, and I could have 5 different radios that all have the same aperture, the same male end here, and I can run any radio on any of my kits, and they all take the same adapter. So it's actually, it solves a problem that is pretty prolific when it comes to running more than one radio for more than one thing. If you work, you know, at the fire department and the police department, or if you're like me and you have radios for work on 2 different jobs, this actually solves a lot of problems. Now let's talk about push-to-talks, because we keep talking about, like, yeah, the thing that plugs into the radio. What is that? It's typically called a push-to-talk or a PTT, and that basically means the button on the side of the radio that you would normally push to talk, you move that. So you have a push-to-talk somewhere else. So keying up, right? Keying up the radio by pushing this button is the same as pushing this button. Couple of problems with PTTs. If they have a lot of cordage, like the one that I bought from Comm Gear Supply, I didn't click the button that takes the gigantic squiggly cord away, and so now I have a gigantic squiggly cord that I have to deal with in my cable management, which is super freaking annoying. It is what it is. If you don't have that, and if you have the option, I would highly suggest you get away from extra super squiggly cord and you move to something like what's on these Nexus NATO plugs, or U94, I think is what they're called. U94s. That's what goes into this. This is a very universal PTT. I mean, it's been around for like 1 billion years. These have, as you can see here, mounting holes where you can mount a big clip, which I'm not a huge fan of, but it does work on some things. Or you can just use some shock cord, cross it around through MOLLE, and it's not going anywhere. But what's cool about them is they have the option, and this is what I purchased on these, to get a 16 or 18 or 12 or whatever inch straight cord. Well, that allows me to route it around my body, around my kit if I need to, or I can just coil it up and it's out the way. So this is actually, in my opinion, a lot better way to do things. Just get a straight cord and don't worry about all the stupid squiggles that get in the way of everything. If you have to work with the squiggles, try not to run them across your body. Try not to run them around you, or, like some sort of South American dictator, like a sash. You'll see guys that will run it all the way around the back and up and over to their shoulder. Like when we have those patrol mics, right? This thing might be older than I am, still works. But look at this. This is just like, it's like 8 feet of cord. This is from a time, gone by. And if you're having to manage this and it's all over you, this thing will be flopping and falling around, and it can be used to pull. Like I said, it can get snagged. So really kind of unnecessary. I don't really see the point of it, and it's just more stuff to get damaged, snagged, pulled, or whatever else. So if you have the option when you're buying your PTT, your push-to-talk, I would suggest that if you can find a universal adapter like the one I have over here, where it adapts between here and here from the push-to-talk to the radio, get that, and then get a straight cord if possible. On my duty kit, the antenna. I got this little stubby antenna that came with the radio, and I really honestly can't find an extender or a different body worn because it's a pretty old pattern, and even Harris doesn't make the P7300 anymore. So what is the reason to have a longer antenna, and what does it matter? Well, for one thing, the antenna gives you a little bit more range, could be a little bit more clarity, but people have that sense of comfort. They have that sense of like, okay, I've got more, I'm going to be able to send out, I'm going to be able to hear better, all that kind of stuff. Depending on the environment you're in and what you're working with, that's actually not true. You can get a lot of signal strength out of the shorter antennas because we have that technology now. One of the things that affects the most is battery life. So if you're looking at short and long antennas, do your research on what's going to pull more or less battery out of the radio, and also look at what you're using as far as repeaters go. So in law enforcement, you have in-car repeaters, you have repeater towers, you have all kinds of stuff for your department's agencies' encrypted frequencies. For people that are building their own networks and things like that, if you don't have a repeater, you probably need a pretty good antenna. But I can get away with having this little 2-inch antenna here. For some of you, this looks familiar, and it doesn't really matter. But if you don't have, a 6 square mile patrol radius or whatever with a repeater in it, you may need something more than that, especially if you're trying to communicate with people a ways out. So again, this video is not about the technical side of things. It's not about the science of radios, but just be aware of it. Like, having a short antenna, having a good PTT, and having a radio doesn't mean you're going to be able to talk to anybody anywhere. You'll be limited on radius, you'll be limited on terrain features, all kinds of stuff, buildings and whatever's in between you, whether you got line of sight, and there's all this other shit. So we've got the radio, we've got the push-to-talk, we've talked about the antennas. Well, what about the part where I can actually speak into the radio now? If I've relocated my push-to-talk, what these do, and again, it has to do with how they interface with the radios, is they also take away the ability to talk into the radio itself. So if I was to push this push-to-talk and I didn't have anything going into it, this radio down here and its in microphone is not receiving anything. I have to redirect that input into a different mic. So if you're talking like patrol comms, if I'm running this big brick right here, this is what I'm having to talk into, right? Like over here on my shoulder. We've modernized, we've gone past this. This is still something you're going to see on patrol and law enforcement, or maybe you can run an earpiece. You prefer the earpieces, huh? Yeah, so earpieces can be good. The pro of that is that there's not a speaker box on your shoulder, so if you go to clear an alarm or you're going to some sort of, intense incident and you need to be able to focus, you don't have like dispatch and the 400 deputies that were getting donuts are like, I'm 1097 because it matters that you're here now. Yeah, you get all kinds of stuff. So you want to keep the traffic and the chatter from blaring, and you can keep it right there at like a more low level, and you can still hear it.
I found it much easier to hear communications coming through an earpiece than it is
correct.
A speaker blasting out.
Your brain is not able to filter out the stuff coming in at the same volume and the same frequency. So a person yelling and the speaker box yelling often end up blending. But when you have an earpiece in your ear, like Mitchell said, you can actually hear that pretty well because it's coming in very differently. Now, some problems with the earpieces. One, they fucking hurt if you don't get one that actually fits your ear hole. You can get some that are custom made and molded. You can get ones with the varying sized tips. But it's going to dilate your ear canal, I'm just saying, unless you have one that fits really well. On top of that, you need some sort of way to retain it, because in a fight or in any kind of foot pursuit or anything like that, it has a tendency to come out. So you really need to understand the limitations and also making it more effective if you're going to run the earpiece. I used that for about 1.5 years when I first started, and then after it got ripped off of my head like 42 times, I decided I was going to go to the shoulder mic. I just have to remember to turn it down, obviously, when I'm going into anything critical or I'm going to clear an alarm. You get your net on your channel and you just turn the radio down where only you can hear it if something chirps. So earpieces are certainly a thing. All that's doing is redirecting the output. Typically the earpiece is going to be plugged into something like this. So I'm still going to talk into this, but the output goes into my ear instead of the speaker box. So going further, what if I'm not running that? And again, if you work patrol and law enforcement, you show up with this bad boy on, you probably diagnosable is all I'm saying. Don't wear this on patrol to go take the my neighbor's dog pooped in my yard call. That's not what I'm saying. But if you're in a job where you can wear this, like over a hat or under a helmet, or you're that guy who has all the cool gear and you're ready for bad things to happen, we would be friends. This is a great option because now you have noise protection, which the earpiece and the shoulder mic did not provide, right? So electronic noise protection is a wonderful thing. You have in-house comms, just like with the earpiece, only I can hear what's coming out of the radio, and I don't have to yell or turn my head or get down into the shoulder because I have this beautiful thing that if you've ever been on an airline, they eat that before they talk over the radio, right? So these are really good systems, and headset comms have been around since like the 60s. What are some of the brands and what are some of the pros and cons of all of them? Well, as you know, this kind of stuff evolves and changes like every 5 minutes. A new headset, what are they on, like Comtac 42 now? I still run the Comtac 3s. But before we get into helmet mounts, we're going to talk about this. So these are the Peltor Comtac 3s. The same thing I have on my helmet. These are just the headband model. There's a lot of different things to consider on the headbands. One, if you're going to wear it over a hat, it doesn't really matter what's on it because the hat is shielding your head from everything else going on, right? But when you put a helmet on top of this and it digs into your head, there are some other things to consider. The comfort of wearing it on your head with a helmet pushing down into it, obviously. They do make relocations, so they put a retention strap around the back, and then you have just basically a single piece of Velcro one wrap that it just sits on your head, and the retention comes from the band on the back of your head. That way you don't have anything between your head and the helmet other than that little band of cloth, which is not weight distributing, so not a big deal. Or it's not pulling, a big strip of material like this, clamping down onto your head with metal. The Comtac 3s run, and I don't even know if they actually make these anymore. It might be a legacy item, but anyway, they run $450, $500 typically on the used side. News, probably closer to 600. And I know there's Comtac 5s. I've used 3s, 4s, and 5s. I have seen the others. 6s, right? We just talked about.
Yeah, 6s are out now.
Yeah, 6s are out, and they're supposed to be good, but again, they're pretty high price. A little cheaper and just a little different. These are the MSA Sordens. So MSA is a safety company. They make all kinds of stuff not for tactical applications. Then they also make tactical application stuff, and they are really big in the UK and other NATO countries. So one thing I like about them is their base models. They do have single down lead, but for the same price as those or less, you can get 2 down leads. So if you're in a job where you have 2 radios, like a task force, you have a department radio, and then you have your task force radio or whatever else, or you're doing some sort of incident command where you've got to talk to firemen and whatever else, you can grab 2 radios and put them into the same headset and work them both. And it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't cost you a whole lot else. One downside of these is that if you're a lefty like me, you cannot switch the comms over. The boom mic over. But on Peltors, you can switch the boom mic out. So that's cool. As you can see, Mitchell's is on one side, mine's on the other when we talk about my helmet. So with these, the main issues that happen, and that's true on mine, they have not the best quality wiring. We get shorts in them a lot. And then also the sheath around the wiring is low quality. So UV and just being used a lot of like crinkling, right? When you store these things, they fold up. It puts stress and rotational force on the sheath around the wires. That stuff comes apart really easily. So I've had these for 7 years, I think. And the boom mic hasn't worked for like 5. But the electronic ear pro portion works, and I can hear people talking. So it's still useful for me, but it's more of like range deck, like I'm teaching a class. I'm not wearing these to talk to people ever. I might plug them in and have a radio I'm listening through if the guys are doing training operation or whatever. But again, I can't talk out of these. These I think were like 180 used, and they stay pretty cheap used. And they have a few different models, but they, you know, they're well known to not be quite as quality as the Peltors. But they get the job done, and you know, I could easily buy a replacement pair, and it really doesn't hurt the wallet to spend $200 on that. Now these are the OpsCore amps, buddy of mine's, and he said they're like the best ever for sound quality. I have never worn them or used them for anything, but you've probably seen them on a lot of the cool guys' helmets. They have the like Mickey Mouse looking wing things that hold them out off the side of the head. These are obviously on the headband. And he said that new, if you're purchasing the full set of it, it's like $1,800, which is absolutely astounding as far as price point. But they are supposed to be the best of the best, cream of the crop. It's what, you know, SOCOM, JSOC, and all that are being issued. So it's supposed to be the best that you can get for the money. Again, most people that run comms with a helmet are not running a headband anymore because it fucking hurts. If you have to wear a helmet for 12 or 16 hours, you're not going to want something between your head and the padding. But for a lot of guys that run, you know, short missions or whatever else, it's easy to be able to have these on and then just throw the helmet on and then take the helmet off and still have their comms. So the advantage of having a headband set of comms is that you don't have to constantly have the helmet on. Like I said, if I have a PTT, it's redirecting my input. So if I unplug my helmet from my radio, I'm not hearing anything that's coming out of the radio, and I can't talk into it. And if I have a body-worn antenna or a redirection kit, if I take my radio out, unclip the PTT, and unclip the redirection kit, you cannot or you should not broadcast out of a radio without an antenna plugged in. It can damage it. So when you use redirection kits and things like that, and you're not using a headband, you kind of have to wear your helmet. So there's some limitations placed by all these different gizmos that if you're not aware, hopefully now this video has helped educate. So let's talk about helmet-mounted comms. These are the same thing as Mitchell's Comtac 3s, and they are on the classic arc rail relocation system. So all it is the same little arms here that you can see, and what they did was they put them in this nifty little patented swivel mount, and it has just a pressure retention. You get past that wall and it applies spring pressure in, and then you go back across the wall and it locks it out. What's cool about that is it applies pressure into your ear, but it's not the same kind of pressure you get by having a headband. So you get that seal, but the seal on a helmet mounted comm is typically not as good as a headband. What that means is over years of shooting and years of explosive breaching and things like that, you get more hearing loss from this, which is actually part of why the OpsCore amps were designed. The angle that those wings press the ear pro into your ear creates a better seal. When you shoulder your rifle, when you have ear pro like this, the rifle pushes up on the bottom typically. But because the amps are not on this plane, the retention's not on this plane, and it's this way, the rifle has less of a tendency to pop the seal open or move it. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into the design of all this stuff. It's really about protecting your ears and also delivering the communications. As far as delivering the communications goes, like I talked about on the Sordens, you have 2 down leads on those. Typically on Peltors, unless you buy specifically the dual lead version, you have that single lead. The lead on these is not changeable, but the boom mic is. So as a lefty, you know, I'm stuck having the lead come out of my left side, but I can move the boom mic over to the right. Stowage on these things can be kind of a pain if you have different stuff mounted on your helmet, you know, things that are functional for what you're doing. You don't want to push the gel cups into those. So if I kept my shit stored like this all the time, pushing down into it, you can pop the gel cups. Not every piece of helmet or band mounted comms have gel cups. There are some like these MSAs that have foam, kind of like the old school like Howard Lates or Lights, or however you say it. That just doesn't provide as much of a seal. So I would suggest if you're looking for something and you have a job or an interest where you're going to be wearing kit, that you get a relocation kit for your antenna Get that antenna out off the front of you if you have something long. That way you can still get that same range and all those capabilities, but it's not out in front. If you got the little stubby antenna, obviously make sure that it's got the capabilities that you need if you have repeater networks and all that kind of crap. You're going to want a PTT that's relatively waterproof and is reliable, and obviously one that fits the type of plug-in that your equipment uses. That's probably the last thing to talk about. There's a billion types of plugins and pins and all this other crap. Go do your research on it. Everything up here uses that universal NATO plug, which I was talking about, goes into those U94s. So all of these, and I'm sure you can zoom in on this, have the same plug. And they're all different brands. All of these have the same plug. And they have different attachments for the radio. You have a universal attachment, you have the two Motorola XTS 5000s, but they all take that same U94. So when you're doing your research and you're trying to buy, the important thing is, does my PTT fit my radio? And does my PTT fit the plug type for the communications device that I'm using to redirect my input and my output? And of course, if you want to get a universal relocation kit, you get this really cool one, like I said, from Comm Gear Supply. I purchased this on my own, on recommendation from Lindsay. They didn't send it to me for free or anything like that. We are partnered with them for supply, but I wanted to be able to buy this and use it on my own. That way I can say if I like it or don't like it. So anyway, that's sort of the down and dirty, the nitty gritty on what I own and why I have my stuff set up the way I do. We covered a lot of material. It's kind of all over the place because that's just the nature of talking about equipment like this. Did I miss anything you think I should talk about?
I would just spell it out, the piece by piece, like what you need.
Yeah.
Order. So
Yeah.
radio,
Got to have a radio.
push to talk,
Yep.
location.
You got to have the radio. The radio has to have an antenna. They're all going to come with one. This is not the factory Baofeng. It's a longer antenna. Why do we want a longer antenna? Better performance. If you are going to be wearing this on something and this antenna is like all up in my face, right? I might want to relocate it. So if you're going to have a radio and you're going to wear it on your body, maybe a relocation for the antenna. If you don't want to have to reach down and touch it and talk into it, and you want to be able to just deal with something normally, you get a push to talk. So you're relocating your antenna and you're relocating the button for the radio to make it work. Well, once you do that, now you also need something to talk into and to hear with, because the PTT and the way this technology works, it removes that from the radio itself. So really what we're talking about is taking everything the radio does and relocating it to a convenient point where I don't have to hold it in front of my face and talk. So again, radio, it's some sort of body-worn or antenna relocation, push to talk. Now I also need something that puts the sound out and something that allows me to talk into it. And that could be something like this, right? They make these with plugs that plug into PTTs. It could be something like this. It puts out sound and it takes sound. Or it could be something that's mounted to a helmet. And that's really what you need. So hopefully you got something out of this video. Like I said, I'm not a huge fan of talking about gear. It's a lot of hot air, and you could literally just Google all this. But the point of this was to collate all the information and show you multiple ways of doing the same thing with different capabilities. That way maybe after watching this, you're like, okay, I have a better basis to now go do my own research. Don't go break the bank, all right? Unless this is the kind of thing where you absolutely need this as a life and death item. Figure out what fits your budget and what is your objective in having the radio. If it's just training with your buddies, get a Baofeng. Screw it, they're 25 bucks. This will at least allow you to train. And then as you get better, maybe upgrade to something like the Alens or like a used Motorola. And as you go and you do more research, you start to learn more, I would also suggest that you take a course on it. Now I know that Mojave Repeater does some classes. Obviously Lindsay through LKD Communications through OTG does classes. I don't know of a whole lot of others. Honestly, I just, not off the top of my head, people that are teaching about radios. But there are some really good online resources. And if Lindsay was here, she would tell you that one of the best things you can do is go check out your local ham radio. It's going to be a bunch of geezers. It's going to be FUDs. It's going to be people who are obsessed over the stuff at like a nerd level. But that's who you're going to learn from. And they'll probably be able to tell you more technical information than your local GWatt LARP subreddit. So if I was you, check that out. Look into the rules for your area on using ham radios, using different frequencies, what licenses do I want or need, and all that kind of stuff. Not because I think you should have to have a license to talk on a damn radio, but I wouldn't want you to go out and innocently pursue this and then get hemmed up with some kind of federal charge because you just weren't paying attention. We do live in the real world, and in this real world, it's not ideal, and we got to abide by laws that are kind of silly. So check all that stuff out. Do your own research. Obviously, train really hard. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, I'll get Lindsay to monitor the comments on this video. Hopefully you got something out of it. If I said anything that's technically incorrect, I'm sure she'll chime in on any of the stuff about what antennas do and all that. But thanks for watching. Check out OrionTrainingGroup.com for all our open enrollment training for American citizens only. Thanks.